Denise Averly was 34 years old when she left her evening gym class early to surprise her husband on the biggest night of his career. Roland had just made senior partner. She'd planned champagne, his favorite dinner, 11 years of marriage finally paying off. Instead, she opened the door to candlelight, to rose petals across the dining room floor, to Roland, down on one knee, reciting the exact words he'd once promised her. To another woman. Simone was 29. Simone was wearing Denise's late mother's pearl earrings, pulled from Denise's own jewelry box like they'd always belonged to her. Roland didn't hear the door. He didn't see Denise standing there, champagne still in her hand. He was too busy promising forever to a woman funded by money he thought his wife would never trace. He had no idea what Denise managed behind the scenes of his career. Every password, every account, every filing. He had no idea what she'd already started to notice. Denise didn't scream. She didn't cry. She said one sentence, calm and quiet, and both of them went pale. Then she turned around and walked out, champagne still unopened. What Roland didn't know was that the wife he'd just humiliated already had access to everything he'd built, and she was about to find out exactly how he'd built it. Before we dive in, comment where you're watching from today. And if stories like this speak to you, hit subscribe, because tomorrow's story is even more intense. The crisis had started at 6:47 in the morning. Denise knew the exact time because she had been the one to answer the phone. She had been standing in her kitchen in bare feet, Roland's coffee already brewing, her own mug cooling on the counter, when the call came in from the Newark distribution hub, a customs hold. 42 pallets of medical equipment sitting on a dock, going nowhere, with 3 hospital systems waiting on the other end. By 7:15, she was at her desk. By 9:30, the hold was cleared. She had spent 2 hours on the phone, with a customs broker in Newark, a compliance officer in Baltimore, and a freight forwarder who kept putting her on hold. She had pulled the original tariff codes, found the clerical error buried in the 3rd attachment of a 5-page form, corrected it, resubmitted it, and personally called the supervising agent to confirm receipt. When her boss, Dale Pritchard, walked past her desk at 10, she handed him a 1-page summary. He skimmed it. "This is exactly the kind of thing I was thinking we needed to do," he said, already walking away. She didn't bother watching him go. This was how it worked. She solved things quietly, and someone else named the solution. She had learned a long time ago that the credit was not the point. The work was the point. The clean resolution, the problem disappearing. That was what she cared about. At least, that was what she told herself. She left the office at 4:30, which was early for her. The champagne was already at home, chilling in the back of the refrigerator since Tuesday, a bottle of Veuve Clicquot she'd been saving for exactly this occasion. Roland had found out yesterday that the partner vote had passed. Tonight was his formal announcement dinner with the firm, but she had planned something before that, a quiet toast. Just the two of them. She stopped at the market on the way home and picked up the things she knew he liked. Good cheese, Castelvetrano olives, that specific brand of crackers he always reached for without looking. She already knew what music she would put on, already knew she'd light the candles on the dining table, the tall white ones in the brass holders his mother had given them. She had been planning Roland's celebrations for 11 years. His first promotion, she had drafted the thank you emails to his supervisors and made sure they landed the morning after. When he'd been nominated for the Young Professionals Award, she had quietly built out his submission, compiling his project history, writing the narrative, formatting everything to the guidelines while he slept. He had won. He had thanked his mentor in his speech. She had clapped from the audience and told herself that was fine. She knew all his passwords. She managed the joint accounts, the auto-pays, the annual tax documents. She kept a shared calendar that she updated and he glanced at. When a client sent an email Roland hadn't answered in 3 days, she would mention it over dinner, casually, as though she'd just happened to notice, so he could respond and look attentive. He was good at the things you could see. The handshake, the room, the presentation. She was good at everything else. She drove home with the grocery bag in the passenger seat and the radio off. The hotel receipt had been in his jacket pocket. She had found it 3 weeks ago while pulling his dry cleaning together. A folded slip from a downtown hotel, dated on a Tuesday he had supposedly worked late. 1 night, room service charge included. She had stood in their bedroom holding it, reading it twice, And then she had put it back exactly where she found it. She had told herself there was an explanation. A client dinner that ran too late. A meeting the next morning downtown. Roland traveled sometimes. He had always traveled sometimes. The cologne had been different too, subtler than his usual. She had noticed it when he came home 2 Fridays ago and kissed her cheek in the kitchen. She had not said anything then either. And last Sunday morning, she had reached across the couch to grab his phone, just to check the time, hers was charging in the other room, and he had pulled it back. Fast. Smooth almost, like a reflex. "Battery's low," he had said. "You can use mine." And he had handed her his Apple Watch instead. She had smiled and said thank you. She was 34 years old. She would be 35 in 3 weeks. Roland was thriving. He had the new title, the new clients, the new everything. She was the woman who corrected tariff codes and planned his celebrations and smiled when she was handed a watch instead of a phone. The thoughts came at her in pieces, quiet and persistent, and she had gotten very good at setting them aside. She pulled up to the house just after 5. She had decided at the last minute to skip her evening gym class. She wanted to get everything set up before Roland got home. The candles, the champagne, the table. But when she stepped out of the car and looked up at the front of the house, the candles were already lit. She could see the warm flicker through the dining room window, and she could hear Roland's voice inside, low, careful, tender in a way she hadn't heard in a long time. The front door was unlocked. That was the first thing she noticed. She had a key already in her hand, but the knob turned before she could use it. Roland never left the front door unlocked. She stepped inside. The entryway was dark, no lights on in the kitchen, none in the hallway, just the warm, flickering orange glow coming from the dining room at the end of the hall, painting the walls in soft, uneven light. The house smelled like the white candles, the tall ones, in the brass holders his mother had given them. Her candles. She stood still for a moment. The champagne bottle was cold and heavy in her hand. Her grocery bag was still hooked over her other arm. The cheese, the olives, the crackers he always reached for without looking. Roland's voice floated down the hallway, low and careful and full. "I didn't know what a real life looked like until you." She knew those words. She walked toward them anyway. She stopped in the doorway of the dining room and took it all in. The mind does a strange thing in moments like that. It doesn't look away. It looks harder, as if seeing everything clearly is the only way to survive it. The table had been pushed to one side. Rose petals on the floor, dark red, scattered in a wide arc. 2 glasses of wine poured and waiting on the sideboard. The candles burning in a row down the center of the table, all 7 of them, and their light falling across Roland and the woman standing in front of him. Roland was on one knee. He was wearing the charcoal suit, the good one, the one Denise had taken to the tailor twice because the shoulders hadn't fit quite right. The woman was young, late 20s maybe, dark hair pulled back, a deep green dress. She was standing very still with both hands pressed to her mouth, eyes wide and bright, and she was beautiful in the way that made everything else in the room feel like it was tilting. And then Denise saw the earrings. Small, ivory, a simple pearl drop on a delicate gold post. Her mother's earrings, the ones Denise kept in the velvet pouch at the back of her jewelry drawer, the ones she hadn't worn in 2 years because she couldn't put them on without her throat tightening. Her mother had worn them to her college graduation. She had been buried without them because Denise had taken them home first, needing to keep something. Those earrings were in this woman's ears. Roland had the ring box open in his palm, and the diamond caught the candlelight and threw it back in every direction. He was speaking, still speaking. "I want every morning to start with you. I want every room I walk into to have you already in it. You are the only thing I've ever chosen that was entirely, completely mine." 11 years ago. A restaurant in Midtown. He had been so nervous he had dropped the ring box under the table and had to reach for it, and they had both laughed, and she had been so sure that the laughing together was the whole point of everything. He had used almost the same words. Denise did not move. She stood in the doorway with the champagne in her hand and the grocery bag on her arm, and she watched her husband propose to another woman with her mother's earrings in that woman's ears, in the dining room where they had eaten 1,000 dinners, with their candles burning down the center of the table. The woman, Simone, she would learn the name later, though some part of her already knew, had not yet seen her. Roland had not yet seen her. She waited one more second, let the moment sit, and then she spoke. "You dropped the box the first time," Denise said. "It went under the table at Mio's, and you had to get down on the floor twice." The silence that followed was total. Roland turned. The color left his face so fast it was like watching a light switch off. Simone's hands dropped from her mouth. She looked at Denise, then at Roland, then back at Denise, and whatever she saw in Denise's expression made her take a half step back. Denise looked at Roland for one long moment. She did not look at the ring. She did not look at the woman again. Then she turned and walked back down the hallway, her footsteps even and quiet on the hardwood floor, the champagne bottle still cold in her hand, the grocery bag still swinging from her arm. She pulled the front door shut behind her, gently, like she was leaving any other way. She drove to a hotel downtown, the same one from the receipt she had put back in his jacket pocket 3 weeks ago. She paid cash at the front desk and didn't offer an explanation because none was asked for. The woman behind the counter handed her a key card and told her checkout was at 11. The room was plain and quiet. She sat down on the edge of the bed without turning on the lights. The champagne bottle rested across her knees, still cold, still sealed. She did not open it. She sat very still and listened to the silence. She didn't call her mother. She didn't call a lawyer. She sat on the edge of the hotel bed in the dark for a long time, and then she reached into her bag, pulled out her laptop, and set it on the mattress beside her. The screen lit up her face. The room stayed dark around it. She opened a new document first, blank white page, cursor blinking. Then she stopped. She opened the bank portal instead. The password came to her without thinking. It always did. She had set it up herself, the way she had set up everything. The joint checking, the savings, the brokerage account Roland had mentioned wanting once and then forgotten about entirely, which she had opened, funded, and monitored for 3 years without him ever asking to look at it. He was not good with details. That was how he had always put it, with the easy smile of someone announcing a charming quirk. "You're so much better at that stuff than I am." She had taken it as a compliment. For 11 years she had taken it as a compliment. She sat with the account screen open and let herself see it clearly for the first time, not just as numbers, but as architecture. Her architecture. She had built this. Every automatic transfer, every tax document, every insurance renewal, every password stored in the shared vault that only she actually maintained. All of it ran through her hands. Roland's professional accounts, his expense reports, the firm's quarterly billing reminders she had tracked in their shared calendar because he missed deadlines otherwise. He had not built a life. She had built it for him, and she had access to every brick. She closed the bank portal and picked up her phone. She opened a new text message to Roland. She stared at the blank field for a moment, and she thought about what she could write. There were so many versions. Some of them were long, some of them were just a single word, and that word was not printable. She typed, "Congratulations on the promotion. We should talk tomorrow, like adults." She read it once, then she sent it. She set the phone face down on the nightstand and did not look at it again. Back to the laptop. New document. This time she let herself type. At the top of the page she wrote nothing dramatic. No heading, no title, Just the date, and below it she started a list. Not of feelings, not of everything she had watched him do or say or take. That list would have no end, and she did not have the time for an endless list. This one was precise. Joint checking account, account number, her name as primary account holder, date opened, joint savings, same. The brokerage account in both their names that Roland did not know the balance of, the password to his firm's expense portal. She had reset it for him 8 months ago when he got locked out, and he had never changed it after. The shared calendar, going back 4 years, synced to both their phones, with every business trip, every late meeting, every unexplained overnight logged and time-stamped in a format that could be exported as a spreadsheet. She typed without stopping. The hotel receipt, the date, the address. She typed that too. She remembered it exactly because she had stared at it long enough, standing in their laundry room with his jacket in one hand and a certainty she had refused to name in the other. She typed the name of the cologne she didn't recognize. It was a small thing, but she typed it anyway. She typed Simone. She didn't know the last name yet. She would find it. She worked for nearly 2 hours without realizing the time was moving. That was the thing about this kind of thinking, the cold, organized kind, the kind that held feeling at arm's length and turned it into structure instead. It wasn't numb. It was focused in a way that felt almost like calm, though she knew it wasn't calm. It was the opposite of calm. It was a long, quiet breath taken before a very deliberate act. She was not going to fall apart. She was not going to call him names or throw things, or show up at the door and give him the explosion he probably expected from a wife who had just seen what she had seen. She was going to be methodical. She was going to be thorough. She was going to give him every reason to believe she was simply sad and cooperative and easy to manage. Right up until the moment he realized she wasn't any of those things. She saved the document. She named it something plain, Household Records, 2024. Then she locked it with a password she had never used for anything else, a combination of letters and numbers that meant nothing to anyone but her. She closed the laptop. The room was very quiet. The city made its low, constant sound outside the window. Distant traffic, a siren somewhere, the hum of everything continuing without concern for her. She sat with it. One tear came. Just one. It moved down her cheek slowly, and she didn't wipe it away. She let it go where it went. Then she reached over and switched off the light. Roland called at 8:47 in the morning. The niece was already showered and dressed. She was sitting at the small desk by the window with a cup of hotel coffee, watching the street below, when the phone lit up on the nightstand. His name on the screen. His contact photo, a picture she had taken herself 3 summers ago on a boat they'd rented for his birthday. She let it ring twice, then she answered. "Hey," she said, quiet, a little tired sounding, not angry. "Denise?" His voice came through warm and careful, the way he spoke to difficult clients. She recognized the register immediately. He was relieved. She could hear it under every word, that loosening of something braced. She's not screaming. Good. This is manageable. "I'm really glad you texted last night," he said. "I was worried about you." She said nothing. I know it's a lot, and I want you to know that I don't want this to be ugly. That's the last thing I want." "Okay," she said. "I've been thinking." He paused, and she could picture him, standing in the kitchen probably, or in that apartment she didn't know about yet, phone pressed to his ear, already running through the version of this conversation that ended the way he wanted it to end. "I think we can handle this like adults, like you said." She almost smiled at that. Like you said. He was handing her own words back to her and calling them his idea. "I think so too," she said. He exhaled. "The condo, I want you to keep it. I mean that. It's yours. I'll find something else. I think it's the fair thing to do." The fair thing to do. 11 years. Every account she had opened, every deadline she had tracked, every presentation she had quietly restructured at 10 o'clock the night before he delivered it. And his version of fair was letting her keep the place she had already been living in. A 2-bedroom condo that she had furnished, maintained, and paid half the mortgage on. He said it the way someone tips a waiter. Keep the change. "That's very generous, Roland," she said. Her voice didn't move. "I just want us both to be okay." Another pause. "You know that, right?" "I hear you," she said. Not yes, not I know, just I hear you. He didn't notice the difference. They talked for 11 more minutes. She let him lead. She gave him agreement where he needed it, silence where he needed to fill it himself, and a small, believable crack in her voice exactly once, just enough to confirm what he needed to believe, that she was hurt, that she was processing, that she was the version of Denise he had always counted on, steady, cooperative, and ultimately manageable. By the time they hung up, he sounded like a man who had handled something. She set the phone down and finished her coffee. Terrence Boyd answered on the second ring. "Dee?" Not surprised to hear from her exactly, but something shifted in his voice fast, a sharpening. "You okay?" "I need a favor," she said. "A real one." A beat. "Tell me." She laid it out plainly. Not all of it, not the earrings, not the proposal she'd walked in on, not the single tear in the dark, just the part he needed to hear first. There were numbers that didn't add up. She had noticed them over the past several months without letting herself look directly at them, the way you see something in your peripheral vision that you don't turn toward because you're not ready. She was ready now. Roland's salary was substantial. His lifestyle had quietly grown past it. The apartment she'd recently learned existed. The ring. A level of spending that had no clean explanation in the accounts she could access. "I think there's a second set of money somewhere," she said. "I don't know what form it takes, but it doesn't match." Terrence was quiet for a moment. She knew he was already thinking in columns, in paper trails, in the language of transactions and entities and accounts that disclosed more than they intended. "You have access to his business expense records?" he asked. "I have his portal login," she said. "He's never changed it." Another short silence. "Okay," he said. "Send me what you have. I'll start quiet. Just looking. Nothing moves until I tell you what I find, and nothing moves without your say-so. But Denise?" He paused. "This could take a few days to trace properly. If there's a structure, it'll have layers." "I know," she said. "Take the time you need." "And you? What are you doing in the meantime?" "Going to work," she said. She walked through the front doors of the logistics firm at 12:34, said good afternoon to the front desk, answered 14 emails, sat in a budget meeting for 90 minutes and caught a vendor error no one else had flagged. She ate lunch at her desk, drank a second cup of coffee, filed 2 reports before 5. She was, to anyone watching, completely fine. 3 miles away, in the spare room of his apartment, Terrence Boyd opened his laptop, pulled up the access credentials Denise had forwarded, and began pulling records late into the night. Terrence chose a coffee shop 3 neighborhoods over from anything connected to either of them. A small place with exposed brick walls and round wooden tables, the kind of spot where no one paid attention to anyone else. He was already there when Denise arrived. 2 coffees on the table, a manila folder sitting face down beside his elbow. She sat across from him. He didn't open the folder right away. He looked at her first, the way he always had, straight on, no softening. It was one of the things she had always respected about Terrence. He didn't manage her. "It's bad," he said. "Tell me," she said. He flipped the folder open and turned it toward her. Pages of transaction records, account summaries, a 1-page summary he had written himself in plain language at the top. She didn't reach for it immediately. She let him explain. "He set up a consulting company," Terrence said, 11 months ago. Called it Averton Solutions. No website, no real clients, no actual work product. It's a shell, just a name and a bank account. What it does is receive payments. He tapped the top page. Those payments come out of client escrow accounts at his firm. Denise looked at the numbers. He routes money through the shell, then pulls it out on the other end as consulting fees, Terrence continued. Over 11 months, it totals just under $94,000. That pays for a lease on a one-bedroom apartment in the Garfield district, a series of wire transfers to a joint account. He paused. His name and Simone Castellano's. And one large purchase 6 weeks ago, $4,100. A jeweler on Merchant Street. The ring. Denise had seen it on Simone's hand in her own dining room, in candlelight, while Roland's voice filled the air with promises. Now she knew whose money had paid for it. Not Roland's, his clients. People who had trusted his firm to hold their funds safely while deals closed. She looked at the summary page for a long moment. "This is criminal," she said. "Yes," Terrence said. He didn't dress it up. "Misappropriation of client escrow funds. Depending on how the firm's licensing structure works, this touches both civil and criminal exposure. His license is at risk. His partnership is at risk." He paused. "This isn't a man who had an affair, Denise. This is a man who committed fraud to fund it." She sat with that. She had known something was wrong with the numbers. She had known it for months in the quiet, uncomfortable way you know something you aren't ready to say out loud. But knowing it in the abstract and seeing $94,000 laid out in neat rows on a printed page were two different things entirely. He had risked everything. His career, his license, their shared financial life. He had done it carefully and deliberately over 11 months, and he had never once said a word. "I have copies of everything," Terrence said. "All of it documented. The shell company registration, the transfer records, the lease, the jeweler receipt. It's airtight." He closed the folder and slid it across to her. "It's yours. You decide what happens with it." She put her hand on the folder. "Thank you," she said. She didn't open it again until that evening. She sat at the small desk in the hotel room with the folder to her left and her laptop open in front of her. She had been pulling shared calendar data, old files from the joint account they had used for years to track appointments, travel, deadlines. She was looking for financial dates, anything that aligned with Terrence's timeline. She found the shell company registration on a Tuesday in February, 14 months ago. She stared at the date. Then she opened the calendar file for that same week, February 14th through the 19th. She remembered that week without wanting to. She had been in the hospital for 2 of those days. A miscarriage at 9 weeks that they had told no one about. Not his mother, not her friends, no one. She had not wanted to talk about it. He had said he understood. He had held her hand in the waiting room. He had said, "I'm right here." She cross-referenced the registration date against the records Terrence had pulled. The shell company was filed on February 16th. The first transfer to Simone's account was dated February 18th, the day Denise came home from the hospital. She pulled up the old shared message thread she had kept archived, the one where Roland had coordinated their schedules during that week. She searched his name alongside Simone's in the firm directory she still had access to. She found it in 30 seconds. A text sent from his cell phone at 2:43 in the afternoon on February 17th. The hospital was St. Callum Medical. She had been in recovery. He had told her he was getting coffee. The message said, "She'll be out by tomorrow. I'll call you tonight. We're still on." Denise read it twice. Then she set the phone face down on the desk. She pressed both palms flat against the surface. She breathed. She sat that way for a long time. Then she picked up her phone, turned it back over, and found Patrice Okafor's name in her contacts. She typed, "Can we meet tomorrow morning? I need to understand my options." She hit send. She waited. Patrice replied in under a minute. "I'll be there. Name the place." Patrice was already at the corner table when Denise walked in. Not a coffee shop this time. a diner on Mercer Street with vinyl booths and laminated menus, and the kind of noise that swallowed conversations whole. Patrice had chosen it deliberately. Denise recognized that about her, the way she always thought 3 steps ahead without making a production of it. They hugged briefly. Then they sat. Patrice pulled a yellow legal pad from her bag and set it on the table. No small talk. That was one of the reasons Denise had called her. "Tell me what you have," Patrice said. Denise told her. All of it. The shell company, the escrow funds, the timeline, the text message from the hospital parking lot. She spoke in a low, even voice, the same voice she used in operations meetings when she was walking someone through a crisis. Patrice wrote steadily, only glancing up to ask a clarifying question. When Denise finished, Patrice set her pen down. "Okay," she said. "Here's where you stand." She turned the legal pad so Denise could follow along. In this state, you can file for divorce on grounds of marital fraud and dissipation of marital assets. The fraud piece is what Terrence documented, Roland using jointly held financial resources and his income-generating capacity to fund a fraudulent scheme that directly benefited a third party. That's dissipation. The court treats that as one spouse destroying marital assets for personal gain. Denise nodded slowly. "The documentation Terrence pulled is exactly what you need," Patrice continued. "Transaction records, the shell company registration, the transfer history. You attach that to the filing. You're not accusing Roland of a crime in the divorce petition. You're citing the financial conduct as grounds. The fraud investigation is a separate track. Those 2 things will run parallel." "And he doesn't have to know I've filed," Denise said. "Not immediately." "Not immediately," Patrice confirmed. "You file, and the court issues the summons. He gets served when you say he gets served. Until that moment, he knows nothing." She paused. "You have a window. Use it." Denise looked at the legal pad. The words, "dissipation of marital assets," sat there in Patrice's neat handwriting, plain and clean. "I'll send you the filing template tonight," Patrice said. "Walk through it once, call me with any questions. You can submit electronically." "I'll be ready," Denise said. The call from Yvonne came at 11:47 that same morning. The message was smooth and practiced, the way all of Yvonne's communications were. "Lunch today, if you're free. Just the 2 of us. I think it would be good for us to talk, darling." The word darling landed the way it always did, polished on the surface, weightless underneath. Denise accepted. The restaurant Yvonne chose was in the Harwick district, the kind of place with white tablecloths and bread service and a wine list longer than the menu. Yvonne was already seated when Denise arrived, dressed in a cream blazer and pearls, her posture the same rigid elegance it always was. She looked like a woman who had never been surprised by anything in her life. "You look tired," Yvonne said by way of greeting. "I'm fine," Denise said. She sat down and placed her napkin in her lap. Yvonne ordered for both of them without asking. Then she folded her hands on the table and looked at Denise with an expression that was almost kind. "I want to be honest with you," Yvonne began. "I've known about Simone for a while now, several months. Roland confided in me." She paused, letting that settle. "I know this is painful, but I also think, if we're both honest, this marriage had run its course. You and Roland want very different things." Denise said nothing. She listened. "There are certain practical matters that need to be handled cleanly," Yvonne continued. Her voice stayed smooth, never quite reaching warmth. "Roland has worked very hard to build what he has. A trust structure has been established to make sure those efforts are properly protected going forward." She tilted her head slightly. "I helped facilitate that. I want you to know that up front. I didn't want there to be any surprises." She said it like a courtesy, like she was doing Denise a favor by telling her. "And I hope you understand," Yvonne added, reaching for her water glass, "that you were never really the kind of wife who fit what this family needed. That's not a criticism. It's simply the truth. Roland needs a partner who matches his world." She took a sip, set the glass down, looked at Denise with the serene confidence of a woman who had never once been held accountable for anything she had said. Denise looked back at her. "Thank you, Yvonne," she said. Her voice was even. "I appreciate your honesty." She folded her napkin, set it beside her untouched plate, and stood. "I actually have somewhere I need to be," she said. She picked up her bag, smiled once, brief and polite, and walked out of the restaurant. That evening, she opened her laptop at the small hotel desk and pulled up the filing template Patrice had sent. She worked through it carefully. Every field, every attachment. Terrence's transaction records, the shell company registration, the transfer history, the dates. At 11:22, she clicked Submit. The confirmation screen appeared. Case number assigned. Filing accepted. She read the case number once. Then she closed her laptop. Roland had no idea. 2 days later, Terrence arrived first. He came through the diner's glass door with a leather messenger bag over one shoulder and 2 manila folders tucked under his arm. He was a big man, broad through the chest, unhurried in the way he moved, and he had the kind of face that never gave much away. Denise had always liked that about him. He saw everything and said only what mattered. Patrice was a minute behind him. She slid into the booth across from Denise and dropped her bag on the seat without breaking stride. "Tell me we're ready," Denise said. Terrence set the folders on the table and opened the first one. "We're ready." He walked them through it the same way he always did, methodically, no drama, just the facts laid flat. 3 pages of transaction records showing the Shell consulting arrangement, transfer dates, dollar amounts, the routing path from Roland's client escrow pool through the Shell company and into a separate account that had been used to pay for Simone's apartment deposit and the engagement ring. A ring that had cost $14,000. $14,000 that belonged, on paper, to clients who had trusted Roland's firm with their money. "The Shell company was registered 8 months ago," Terrence said. "But the first transfer happened 14 months ago. Small amounts at first. He got bolder over time." He tapped the page. "Classic escalation pattern. They always get bolder." Patrice was already writing. "Is it airtight?" Denise asked. "It's airtight," Terrence said. "Every number has a source document behind it. This isn't circumstantial. This is a paper trail a compliance officer could follow with their eyes closed." "Good," Denise said. She reached into her own bag and pulled out a plain craft envelope. Inside was a printed set of documents she had assembled herself the previous evening. A copy of her valid marriage certificate, the bank records Terrence had compiled, a 1-paragraph summary written in plain language, and nothing else. No accusations, no emotional language, just facts arranged in order. She set it on the table. "For Simone," she said. Patrice looked at it without touching it. "No return address." "No return address," Denise confirmed. "Just information. What she does with it is her business." "She's going to end it," Patrice said. Not a question, just a read. "I think so," Denise said. She thought she was building something real. Nobody signs up to be the woman who got proposed to with stolen money. She paused. "But even if she doesn't end it, she'll know. And knowing changes everything." Terrence closed the first folder and opened the second. "The compliance packet is separate. I've kept them completely clean from each other." He laid out the second set of documents, formatted differently, more technical, structured the way a forensic accountant would present findings to a professional body. "This goes to the managing partner's office and to the firm's internal compliance officer at the same time. Same day. One through official channels, one through an anonymous tip line the firm publishes on its website." He looked at Denise. "Firms like Roland's are legally obligated to investigate when a tip comes in with documentation at this level. They don't have a choice." "When?" Denise said. "Whenever you say." Denise looked at the folders. Then she looked at Patrice. "The divorce summons," she said. "When does Roland get served?" "You authorize service for the end of this week," Patrice said. "Thursday." "Then everything goes Wednesday," Denise said. "The managing partner meeting in the morning, Simone's packet in the afternoon. The compliance tip goes in at the same time as the meeting." She looked at Terrence. 72 hours before the summons lands." Terrence nodded once. "Wednesday." He'll walk into Thursday completely surrounded, Patrice said quietly. There was no satisfaction in her voice, just clarity. Denise had one more piece. She had called Roland's firm that morning, identifying herself as Roland Averley's wife and asking to schedule a brief courtesy visit with the managing partner regarding some paperwork connected to Roland's promotion, a standard benefits designation form she had questions about as the named beneficiary. The assistant had been pleasant. The meeting was confirmed for Wednesday at 10. She told Terence and Patrice this now. Terence let out a slow breath through his nose. "You're going in person." "I'm going in person," Denise said. "The documentation routes through compliance separately. I'm just there to ask about a benefits form." She let that sit for a moment. "And to make sure the managing partner knows my name, my face, and that I exist." Patrice looked at her for a long moment. "You've thought about this?" "I've thought about everything," Denise said. They finished their coffee. They went over the timing once more. Then they packed up the folders, and Denise tucked Simone's envelope carefully into her bag, and they walked out into the gray mid-morning. That night, Roland was at a rooftop bar in the Meridian Hotel with 6 colleagues, celebrating his promotion. Denise knew because he had texted her, still performing civility, still managing her, to say he would be out late. She didn't respond. She sat at the hotel desk and read the confirmation from Wednesday's meeting with the managing partner one more time. Then she set her phone face down on the table and listened to the quiet. Roland had suggested a restaurant. Denise had said no. "The house," she told him over the phone. "The dining room, 6 o'clock. There was a pause. "Denise." 6 o'clock, Roland." She arrived first. She let herself in with her key, set her coat over the back of a chair, and placed a single manila folder on the table. No candles. The overhead light was on, bright and flat, the way you light a room when you want to see everything clearly. She stood at the window and waited. He came in at 6:03. He was dressed well, as always. Dark jacket, collar open, the kind of effortless presentation that had taken him decades to perfect. He looked around the dining room the way a man does when he's trying to read the mood of a space before deciding how to enter it. His eyes landed on the folder. His jaw tightened, just slightly. "Sit down, Roland," Denise said. He sat. She sat across from him and opened the folder. She didn't slide it toward him right away. She just placed her hands flat on either side of it and looked at him. "I want to tell you what's already happened," she said. "Not what I'm planning. What has already happened. Past tense. Because I think it's important you understand there's a difference." Roland opened his mouth. "Let me finish," she said, quietly. Not a threat, just a fact. He closed his mouth. She began. "The shell company, the escrow accounts, 3 pages of transaction records, sourced and documented, already in the hands of the firm's compliance officer and the managing partner as of Wednesday morning." She had walked into the managing partner's office herself, she told him, asked about a benefits form, made sure he knew her name, made sure he knew she existed. The anonymous compliance tip had gone in at the same time, formatted by a forensic accountant whose name she did not offer. Roland's face had gone pale. Not the pale of surprise, the pale of a man doing math in his head and not liking the sum. $14,000, Denise said, "for a ring, bought with client funds." She let that sit in the air between them. "The ring you gave her in this room." She turned to the next page, the timeline. The affair beginning 14 months ago, the shared calendar entries, and then one specific date, a Tuesday in October, 14 months prior, when she had been in a hospital room, losing a pregnancy she hadn't yet told anyone about, and his phone had been in a hospital parking lot, sending text messages to Simone Castellano. She said it plainly. She did not look away from him. Roland's mouth moved. No sound came out. "I never told anyone about that," Denise said. "I thought I was protecting you. I thought I was protecting us." She turned to the last page. "I was wrong about a lot of things. The trust, Yvonne's lunch, the asset-shielding arrangement Roland's mother had been quietly building for months, confirmed by Yvonne herself over a Caesar salad she hadn't finished. Denise read back 2 specific phrases Yvonne had used, phrases she had written down in the car immediately after, because she had known even then she would need them. She had included Patrice on a follow-up call that same afternoon. Patrice had noted everything. She closed the folder. Roland sat very still. The composure he had carried in, that polished, practiced stillness he wore like a second jacket, was gone. What was left underneath was smaller than she had expected. Then it shifted. She watched it happen. She had expected it. Denise. His voice dropped low, soft, the voice he used when he wanted to seem sincere. I know what this looks like, but you have to understand. I was going to tell you. I was going to do this the right way. Things moved faster than I... The divorce was filed Thursday, Denise said. You were served this morning. He stopped. The documentation is already moving through official channels, she continued. Nothing you say in this room changes that. The compliance office doesn't need my permission to proceed. Terrence routed it correctly. It's out of my hands now. She paused. And out of yours. Something shifted in his face. The softness left. You went to the firm. His voice had an edge now. Do you understand what you've done? My career is not my responsibility, Denise said. I could have handled this. You didn't. You had no right. I had every right. Still calm, still even. You used client money, Roland. That's not a marriage problem. That's a crime. He sat back. He looked at the folder. Then he looked up at her, and she could see him calculating, sorting through his remaining options, reaching for something he could still use. If you just give me time, I can fix. There's nothing to fix, Denise said. Not for me. She stood. She picked up her coat from the back of the chair, folded it over her arm, and picked up the folder. She looked at him one last time, not with anger, not with satisfaction. Just looked at him, the way you look at something you are finished with. Then she walked out, leaving Roland alone at the table where he had once knelt for another woman, with nothing left to manage and no one left to underestimate. The call came on a Monday. Roland was placed on administrative leave by 11 o'clock in the morning. The firm's compliance officer had reviewed the documentation over the weekend. The managing partner had looped in outside counsel by Sunday night. By Monday morning, there was nothing left to deliberate. Denise heard about it from Terrence, who heard about it from a contact at the firm's audit committee. He texted her 2 words, "It's moving." She read it at her desk, set her phone face down, and went back to work. Simone Castellano received the packet on a Tuesday. Denise didn't know exactly when she opened it. She didn't need to. What she knew was that by Tuesday afternoon, Roland had called her 4 times in under 2 hours. Not Denise, but Simone. And that by Wednesday morning, Simone had filed a formal HR complaint against Roland, citing professional retaliation concerns stemming from the relationship. Patrice forwarded Denise a copy of the HR filing summary, no comment attached. The engagement was over. The ring, bought with other people's money, slipped onto Simone's finger in Denise's dining room, had been returned, according to Terrence's contact, by courier. Boxed. No note. Denise thought about Simone for a moment. Not with warmth, exactly, but without the anger she'd expected to feel. Simone had been lied to. That didn't absolve her, but it was true. The moment she'd learned the truth, she'd walked. Denise could respect a clean exit. She had made one herself. The family dinner was Yvonne's idea, which made it either very brave or very foolish. Denise suspected the latter. The invitation came through a cousin, Roland's side, a woman named Bet, who had always been kind to Denise in that careful, surface-level way that people are kind when they're unsure whose side they'll eventually need to be on. Bet called and said Yvonne wanted to address things with the family before the news spread further. She said it in a tone that suggested Yvonne believed she could still manage the shape of this story. Denise said she would attend. She arrived in a black blazer and flat shoes, her hair pulled back, no jewelry except small gold studs, her own, from her own box. She was the first one seated at Yvonne's long dining table, a glass of water in front of her, hands folded, waiting. The room filled around her. Aunts, cousins, Roland's uncle, a heavy-set man who had never learned her last name despite 11 years of holidays. Roland was not there. Yvonne came in last. She was dressed as though the evening were a performance, which it was. Cream blouse, pearls, the practiced composure of a woman who had spent decades deciding how rooms received her. She took her seat at the head of the table and looked at Denise once, briefly, before looking away. The dinner started. It was almost formal, almost polite, almost normal, until Yvonne set down her fork and began to speak. She said that Roland had made mistakes, that the situation had gotten complicated, that she had tried to help her son navigate a difficult transition, and that perhaps some of the steps taken had been premature. Premature. The word sat in the room like something that had been dropped and not picked up. Denise waited until Yvonne finished. Then she said, clearly and without rushing, "You knew about the affair for months. You helped him move assets to protect himself before the divorce was filed. You told me I was never the right kind of wife for this family." She looked around the table, let every face register what she'd said. "I wanted everyone here to know that. Not because I need anything from any of you, just because it's true." She stood. She picked up her coat from the back of the chair. Same gesture, different room. She nodded once at Bet, who looked stricken, and walked out through Yvonne's front door while the room was still deciding how to breathe. No one called after her. The industry piece was quiet but devastating. Terrence had made sure the paper trail reached 2 specific compliance officers at firms Roland had dealt with directly. People who would know exactly what the shell arrangement meant, and who would not be able to unknow it. Within 10 days, Roland's name had made the rounds in the commercial real estate circles he had spent years building himself into. His promotion was formally rescinded the following week. His license was placed under review, pending the fraud investigation's outcome. The settlement came 3 weeks later. The documented dissipation of marital assets, the escrow funds, the apartment, the ring, Yvonne's trust arrangement, gave Denise's attorney very little to argue against, and Roland's attorney very little to argue with. It was favorable. Methodically, plainly, documentably favorable. Denise signed the papers at a table in her attorney's office on a Thursday afternoon with a pen that belonged to her. Roland had no fiancé, no career, no license. And somewhere across the city, a mother who had staked her reputation on a son who had proven himself unworthy of the bet, and who now had to sit with that at her long dining room table, alone, without anyone left to manage the story for her. Denise drove home in the quiet. She didn't feel triumphant. She didn't feel hollow either. She felt like herself. Completely, finally, like herself. 18 months later, the sign on the door read, "Averly Operational Consulting," in clean, dark letters. No flourish, no tagline, just her name and what she did. Denise unlocked the office every morning at 7:45, not because she had to, because she wanted to, because walking through that door still felt like something worth doing deliberately, a small, private ceremony she hadn't told anyone about and didn't need to. The space was modest, a reception area with 2 chairs and a low table. Her own office behind a glass partition, visible to anyone who came in. She had chosen that on purpose. Nothing hidden. Nothing managed from behind a closed door. She had spent enough years in invisible rooms. She set her bag down, started the coffee, and pulled up her calendar. 8:30. A call with a regional shipping company whose CFO had discovered a vendor payment loop his own team hadn't flagged in 2 years. She had spotted it in 40 minutes during their intake meeting. She hadn't made a production of it. She'd simply shown him where to look. That was what she did now. She found the cracks that people couldn't see because they were standing too close to the wall. She had learned that skill the slow way, through 11 years of managing systems that weren't credited to her, And then, through one very specific, very ugly week of discovering exactly how much damage those same systems could hide, she turned what she survived into the sharpest tool she owned. Her first client had come from a referral by Terrence, her second from the first. By the 6th month, she had a waiting list and a part-time associate named Kwame who was meticulous in the way that quiet people sometimes are. Careful, thorough, unbothered by the pace of the work. She liked him immediately. By month 12, she had stopped checking whether she was enough. The profile appeared in the Maywood Business Journal on a Thursday in October. It was half a page with a photograph. Denise at her desk, jacket on, pen in hand, looking directly at the camera. Not performing, just present. The headline read, "The Operator: How Denise Averly Built a Consulting Practice Around the Fraud She Survived." She had been nervous about that line when the journalist proposed it. She'd sat with it for a day before agreeing. Then she'd thought about Yvonne's word, premature. She'd thought about how many women had survived something and then made themselves smaller afterward, so no one would have to feel uncomfortable about it. She told the journalist yes. The article was accurate. It mentioned the divorce. It mentioned the fraud investigation without naming Roland, as per her attorney's careful review. It quoted her once, near the end, in a way she liked. "I wasn't trying to be brave. I just got very clear about what was actually true versus what I had been telling myself for a long time. Once you can see that difference, it's hard to unsee it." Kwame printed a copy and taped it to the wall near the reception desk without asking. She let it stay. The cafe was 3 blocks from her office. She went there on Fridays, usually around noon. A window table, a cortado, whatever she felt like reading. It was routine, small, entirely hers. She was waiting for her coffee when she saw him. Roland was across the street, coming out of a glass-fronted building she didn't recognize. Smaller than his old firm, narrower lobby. He was wearing a coat she didn't know, carrying a bag that looked worn at the strap. His posture was the same, upright, practiced, but there was something in it that had gone slack, the way a frame looks after the picture inside has been removed. He was with no one. He hadn't seen her yet. She watched him for a moment, the way you watch something that used to mean everything and now simply exists. A street you used to live on, a song you don't skip but don't search for. Then he turned. He saw her through the glass. She didn't move, didn't straighten her posture or look away, didn't reach for her phone. She just held his gaze from across the distance, the cafe window between them, the street between them, 18 months and a signed settlement and a name on a door between them, and felt nothing she hadn't already made her peace with. He didn't cross the street. He didn't wave. He just stood there for a moment, his worn bag at his side, his practiced posture finally failing to hold, watching her the way a person watches something they understand now that they never deserved. Her cortado arrived. She thanked the server. She turned back to the window. He was already gone. She wrapped both hands around the warm cup, felt the steam rise, and looked out at the street. Her street, her Friday, her life, and let the moment settle into the quiet where it belonged. Thank you for watching until the end. If this story meant something to you, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. I've got 2 stories on the screen that you have to watch next. Have a great day!